It's a beautiful sunny day in Hampshire. The birds are singing and all feels well with the world, but is it? I have with me Dr. John Holland, Head of Ecology with the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. John, I know you're passionate about songbirds. Are we really losing some of these important species?
Oh yes, the records go back to 1970, and since then we've seen over a 50% decline in birds on farmland and 25% decline on birds in woodland. So it's quite substantial.
So if you're thinking about some of our lovely songbirds, which ones would you say are at most risk?
Well, the birds that are most threatened on farmland, birds like yellowhammer, skylark, song thrushes as well.
And so what is the research that the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust has been doing, and what exactly is it showing?
Well, our research has shown over the last 40 years that farmland birds are really suffering mainly because of agricultural intensification. So farmers are being encouraged to increase food production on farmland, and that's had quite a dramatic impact on the landscape and in the food resources available to the birds. So, for example, the farmers now sow all their crops in the autumn instead of in the spring, and that means that those stubble fields where the birds used to forage have disappeared in the winter. And also the habitats have changed as well, so we've seen some loss of hedgerows and appropriate nesting habitats. The farms have just got generally a lot tidier and less opportunities for birds to find food.
That's really interesting. So, having discovered what the problem is, how are we going to try and get these fabulous songbirds back into the countryside again?
Well, our policy has always been to provide advice backed with good scientific research. So we'd start off by looking at the ecology of the individual bird species we're interested in. So, for example, we've done that with the grey partridge, so we understand the type of food it needs, when it needs it, and the types of habitats that it likes to nest in. All the resources that a farmland bird needs to survive, we need to understand what they are. And then once we know that, then we can develop practical management approaches that can be used by farmers to encourage birds. And a lot of these are now funded through agri-environment schemes as a result of our research.
And I think earlier you gave me a fantastic statistic that you've discovered about blue tits. Would you like to explain how hungry these birds get?
Well, it's generally acknowledged that birds such as a blue tit, the brood of chicks, could eat up to 15,000 insects during their period when they're in the nest. So yeah, they do take a lot of feeding. Gosh,
that's an awful lot of insects. And so presumably one of the key aspects of your research is to discover how you can create those lovely insect-rich habitats that will be perfect for these birds.
And we're certainly doing that at the moment. So we're trying to find what sort of plants provide the most insects for the birds, and whether we can create habitats which have other functions as well. So we're looking very closely at wildflower mixes which farmers can sow around the edges of the field. They provide lots of flowers but also lots of insects as well, including bees, which are also suffering, and the birds can then go and forage in these insect-rich habitats.
That's fabulous. So people love songbirds. What can they do to support you and support the research that you're doing?
Well, it's always very difficult to get funding, especially for the fundamental studies looking at the ecology of a species. So what we tend to do is try and use MSc students, PhD students, which are a good way to get good quality research done relatively cheaply. And then we also need funding for things like equipment, GPS equipment we've been using to track the movement of birds. And then we also need funding for senior scientists, of course, to develop these research programs and do the analyses.
So for tracking birds, you actually put little collars on them, do you, so that you can follow them around?
Yes, well, at the moment they're relatively big pieces of equipment, so they can only go on large birds such as the woodcock. But the technology is getting better, and we hope in the future they'll be small enough to put on some songbirds as well.
That's fantastic. So people can support your research by supporting our Save Our Songbirds project, and it's vitally important that this research is carried out so we can improve our knowledge, improve the habitats, improve the conditions for these wonderful songbirds. And if you want to help us, please donate to the Save Our Songbirds project. Thank you.